Good morning, everyone. It's time for Virtual Water Cooler. I am Kelly Hoey, author of Build Your Dream Network, and I am so thrilled to be here with my friend Jessica Rosen, employment lawyer and, congratulations, podcast host with a new released podcast. How are you this morning?
I'm thrilled. I'm doing well. Thank you. And great to be here. Great to talk to you.
Okay. So quick background for those who don't know you. You're an employment lawyer.
Work with businesses exclusively, helping them figure out how to navigate the complex waters of employment law in 2021.
Okay, and those are complex waters. I'm in any year, and especially the last couple of years. I'm just recalling from my days of being a lawyer and being a corporate lawyer and doing prospectuses, and there'd always be did someone talk to the employment lawyer at some point at some strange hour on a deal to make sure that they would sign off on that prospectus? Anyway, a total aside. Let's talk about your new podcast, because that's why we're here at the water cooler today. So excited. Okay, More Than a Fallback. Talk to me. More Than a Fallback. This is the name of your new podcast. How long have you been working on this idea?
It came to me one Friday night in May 2020. I was putting my kids to bed, and I was thinking about a client that had basically pivoted in the pandemic. They do usually like construction, fabrication, and they pivoted to making face shields in the pandemic. And I was thinking about this tremendous undertaking that they were engaging in, and they have just the coolest machines. My kids love to build, and they have these just amazing machines at their workshop. And I thought I would love to take my kids to go see that workshop. It's amazing. Obviously, in May 2020 in New York City, that's not happening. So let's think of something else to do to share the stories of this business and other businesses like it that are doing really interesting work.
Okay. I'm looking at it, and I found all the comments. And now that we said you're an employment lawyer, Diana, well, you know what? Jessica is there on LinkedIn, so find her, see what's going on, and I'm sure if it's not Jessica, she knows people, knows resources, knows where to do different things. Because I'm seeing, Diana, that you're in Houston, and I hope you have power and electricity and don't have burst pipes and all that craziness that Texas has gone through with weather. We have no complaints here in New York. The sun is shining this morning. Okay, so 10 months, you've got this idea. You start working on this. What did I do? Why this idea? Like, why?
Okay.
Why not Jessica Rosen on Employment Law podcast?
Right. So I knew early on in the pandemic, like, we're not going back to our usual networking that we were doing. And so I knew that you need to have a digital presence. And I was thinking of, it's funny, I want to be heard. Like, I have a lot of ideas about the world, and I want to get them out there. And so I was, kind of thinking about that. It was in the back of my mind, but I didn't want it to just be an employment law podcast, because I wanted it to be interesting for me to make. Not that employment law is not interesting, but I wanted it to be something that I was really passionate about, that was adjacent to my practice, and so this podcast, so I'll tell you what it's about. A fallback is a last resort. And I got the idea because my grandmother told my mom that she should go into teaching because it was something to fall back on, right? That was what a generation of people, particularly women, were taught, that that's what they should do for a profession in case their other plans didn't work out. So I thought,
honestly, my mother was told to be a teacher too, and maybe she'd marry a principal. Like, it just sounds so settling, in terms of like the aspirations of an entire generation. Anyway.
Exactly. So More Than a Fallback is where you know what your superpower is and apply it in business. So that's the idea behind it. Yeah.
Okay. So dive into that more.
Okay. So I mean, the original idea was like, I want to celebrate business and celebrate entrepreneurship, creativity, and joy at work, because I had been advising businesses day after day in the pandemic in my crowded apartment, in my crowded shared office / bedroom, sitting across from my husband, bumping knees on like day-to-day terminations, layoffs. These small and mid-sized businesses are just going through tremendous change in the early days of the pandemic. And so I wanted to do something that was uplifting, thinking about work and what drives meaning at work. And the idea, the title really like has evolved, partially caused by talking to intellectual property lawyers about what it's like to find a name for something and what are limitations on that. And it really clicked. The final name really clicked back. Actually, I think it was New Year's Eve, and I was at Riverside Park in a playground with my friend Daniel Stiepelman. Daniel Stiepelman is a screenwriter. He's a writer, and he is just a friend. We have friends from the neighborhood. And so he's really been actually an amazing creative partner. And we've had these play dates over the last 10 months, like 3 or 4 of them that have been instrumental in the creative process. And so we were talking about, I had the title of More Than a Fallback, and I had this idea of Superpower, and I hadn't really connected it. And he was like, then I kind of, after talking to him, I was like, oh no, they don't make sense. They don't fit together. And I went back and I was like, maybe I should change the title. I started really questioning it. And then I defined it as more than a fallback is where you know your superpower and use it in business. It's where you really have live your passion at work and build a business and a movement beyond that.
That is fantastic. And, you've also sort of a little reveal here, because, one of these things you and I talk about with networking is like, someone could say, well, this is your friend and you're out, you said a play date, so the kids are involved. Someone could say, well, why are you talking about what's going on at work with, in those situations? And this is why I always say to people, share your ideas, share what you're doing, share what you're struggling with at work, because you never know. Whoever is in front of you, whether it's your friend or the hairdresser or whatever, they could help you. And they can help you with unlocking these ideas and all the rest of it. So that is that. Okay, so that's amazing. So you then tied these 2 ideas together. And how'd you come up with a list of who to interview?
Oh, that's a good question. That was early on. I quickly knew a variety of people that I wanted to interview. I wanted people. So initially, the idea was, because before I went to law school, I had other careers. And so initially the idea was I want to talk to people who've had kind of a meandering career in various areas, who've done different things and then kind of jumped into what they're good at. And then in the end, I realized that's not so important. It's more about the process of discovering what you're really good at, through just whatever path you take. And so initially I was really interested in people like you who kind of have had these various different careers. And so there's some of the guests I've had, like Sarah Miller. So Sarah Miller is a friend of mine from high school who went to Wesleyan and studied dance and choreography. And she was friends with Lin-Manuel Miranda at Wesleyan. And she did the choreography for In the Heights. He was a college production. He wrote it over one winter break, sent her a mixtape, and she wrote it. She did the choreography. And
for those who don't know what a mixtape is, please go to Wikipedia.
Right. Well, I actually don't know if it was a mixtape. He wrote the original music, whatever it was, but he sent her yes. He sent her a recording. And so her story has just been really fascinating, because she now is working with him and his family doing special projects and philanthropy, but has really honed through various steps of her career those skills that have really brought her to this moment where she's doing really impactful work. And so it was really rewarding. And to give her the credit, I mean, the superpower idea was planted by 2 Sarahs. One, Sarah Feingold, who is the star of today's episode. And she talks about knowing what your superpower is if you want to get on a board, to be able to articulate getting on the board of a business. How do you articulate what your superpower is and be able to put that out there? And then Sarah Miller, when I was interviewing her, she said, well, that's my superpower. My superpower is really being good at putting a project into place, making something happen from someone else's idea and effectuating it. And so it was actually through the really amazing interviews that I honed this idea even further. So I think the key was having good friends early on who would help me be part of that creative process and let me interview them a couple of times to go back and help, hone the process. And then finding other people like you, or speaking to another interesting business owner this week who will be on the podcast shortly, kind of who also has had a variety of different careers and comes to the business he built with an incredible sense of purpose and meaning, and kind of a drive to make change. So just people building movements, innovators and entrepreneurs.
Absolutely love it. For anyone who is just joining us, this is the Build Your Dream Network virtual water cooler where I chat with people from my network who are doing interesting things, and we take a break from our morning email and routine, and we grab our, there we go, grab our cuppa. There, gratitude, as I said the other day on Instagram, gratitude changes everything, and so does Tylenol, when case may be. So we chat on something that they're doing, just like if you were sitting at the office water cooler. I see there's lots of people on LinkedIn this morning. This is kind of fun. StreamYard streaming onto LinkedIn. So if you've got questions, pop it in the comments, and we could chat about it, because you're part of this conversation too. Like I said, it's the virtual water cooler. So grab your cuppa and come and hang with us. So More Than a Fallback, where can people find your podcast?
Wherever you listen. I have a website, morethanafallback.com, and you can find all the episodes there. You can subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and lots of other places.
Awesome. And people should watch, listen, review, and do all those good things that you do with podcasts. Okay, let's go back to where we started. You're an attorney. We've also known, because you said the word play date, you have children.
Yes.
I know the world of law, that there is some interesting work demands, as in terms of the time you need to put in. But you also have to put time into client development. Is there an easier way to do client business development than a podcast?
Yeah. Definitely a number of people said that to me. Don't you want to do something else? Isn't there a better return? But, for me, it's really a passion, right? It's really a project that is built from something that has a higher purpose than just business development. I did in one iteration of this say that it's a podcast I would have liked to have had when I was graduating with a Spanish literature degree and feeling a little hopeless about what was out there. Because my goal in this podcast is to share stories of people doing interesting work in business that you might not otherwise know exists. Lots of people who take a passion or something they're really good at and they build a business out of it. And when you're sitting in college or younger, you don't know what's out there. You don't know the possibilities. So yeah, it's really driven me. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn, and I'll send it out shortly, that, I was reflecting on some lessons from this time. And I really found that it was all encompassing. I mean, I thought about this while jogging. I have my jogging friend, we talk about it. While doing the dishes, listening to other people's podcasts. It's really, my kids and I and my husband, we tried to record the music. Everything is my do it yourself. I did the audio editing. I did the graphics, the music, all of it. So at one point, my kids and I and my husband got on tambourines and started making cacophonous music to try to get ideas for the music, right? So it was really all encompassing, and so it's been really meaningful to me to not just be thinking about this as business development. It's really for my own self to feel like I'm part of something and doing something bigger. But the podcast is related to my practice in that I am interviewing people who are clients, potential clients, or connectors. I'm, talking about a subject that's related to what I do because I work with businesses to help them navigate complex employment law issues. And, advising clients in the pandemic and thinking about a lot of layoffs and terminations from my vantage point, it's been incredibly meaningful to be kind of thinking about the positive side of work and what drives us.
Right. Regardless of, I'm going to say, the hurdles, the struggles, back in the day, the cubicles and fluorescent lights, what were the things that drive us and make us enthusiastic about the work we do or showing up? I think that is so critical. What were some of the surprises in some of the interviews in terms of, I'm thinking particularly we hear so much around find your passion. It just sounds almost like, kind of want to poke my eyes out. It just sounds so cliche, but how did people reveal how they found something, their superpower, how they find that thing that was more than their fallback career, more than their plan B? How did they do that?
I think it's so you're one of my guests. which I'm thrilled to share, and you'll be up in a few weeks. But so you actually said something really interesting, because the idea is, I initially defined superpower as what you're good at and what you love doing. But that's actually too complex a definition. A superpower is something that you are inherently, that you have a unique skill to yourself. And I think that when you can discover what your superpower is, finding meaningful work or building something from that is so much more obvious. And so for you, actually, you gave an example of how I asked, like, when you were younger, what you thought your superpower would be. And you kind of like didn't really have, you said, I don't think I knew what it was, right? And you, as you get older, you had someone who told you, who helped kind of hold up the mirror to yourself and help you realize that you could not just be a lawyer, more than a lawyer, more than working in the administration of a law firm, but you could take your skill, your superpower of being a connector and connection maker, really a super connector, and you could turn that into something that was a business, right? And so I think that's been really surprising, is a lot of people, a theme that has come up a lot is like people who kind of knew what their superpower was, but needed someone else to help them discover it and then build from there. And then the meaning flows really naturally from there.
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes I think when we hear the word like find your passion, you think it's this thing you need to be crazy in love with. And like initially, like it, like sort of like, I would say stereotypes in terms of falling in love, like, great romantic love. We think it has to be something that's overwhelming, whatever. But sometimes it's like sitting back and going, whoa, hold on a minute here. This thing I do with ease and flip off and don't think about, that's the thing that is my superpower. And is there a way of doing something with that? And is there a way of creating something that I am crazy passionate about? Kind of like, I want to say the growing love for a child versus the giving birth and being in love with a child kind of thing.
It doesn't happen. So yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that it's something that this idea of like find your passion, like it's not always so straightforward, right? And for example, so my superpower is that I'm hyper attuned to my surroundings. And it was one that, until I articulated it and really leaned into it in business, I kind of was doing business and I knew about the superpower, but until I really connected the two, then I was like, oh, this is so powerful, and the work, the sort of some of the drudgery of the job that I do, because it's not always easy, perfect. But some of it, even in like a litigation standpoint where I'm calculating deadlines or thinking about the timeline in a case, I have a really good sense of time and space and memory. And so when I can anchor kind of a situation to a timeline in my head, it's like putting a puzzle together. And so where the normal sort of like just, oh, I'm doing litigation because I'm doing it, that's part of what I do, it becomes like more fun when I can think about the superpower, right? And so I think that like, this idea of kind of like feeling like you need meaning at every moment of your job, they have to be happy at every moment. That's a myth, obviously. But you can, by knowing what your superpower is, you can take your day job and you can actually find ways to connect kind of that superpower and then be even, prouder of that ability.
Well, that's okay. How did you discover your superpower?
So about a year ago, January, I was like Sarah Feingold at this Fourth Floor. So Sarah Feingold is a co-founder of the Fourth Floor, which is devoted.
And that's where we met through.
I heard your name and I wrote it down that you were like this master networker, and I wrote down your book and I went and looked it up. Yeah, after that event. So she was singing your praises as she should. And so she was saying that you need to get on a board to get more women on boards. You should be able to articulate your superpower in a succinct way. And so it was through that the idea was planted. And my superpower, like I've known it exists, but it wasn't until I realized actually not everyone has this superpower, right? It's only unique to me. And so it was only in the last 6 months or so, and I was reading a New York Times article and I was like reading about parenting and looking at my kids and myself, and that I was able to put all the pieces together.
so, sometimes discovering our superpowers at a different point in time is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. So what can we expect from your podcast? Can you give us some more hints? You've given us some hints on our conversation on who's coming up, but what kinds of conversations? You maybe don't want to give names, but what kind of conversations?
No. Well, look, so it's built around 4 questions that I heard on another podcast, my first show, which is with Eva Price, and she's a Broadway producer, and she put together a great podcast that's built around these 4 main questions. So I came up with that structure based on her idea. And so the questions are, what is your superpower and how did you discover it? And then what's a challenge you've overcome because of your superpower? Now we're going to time travel and you visit your younger self. What advice do you give? And so it's really focused on the process of discovering your superpower and how you tie it into business. So that's the theme. And I like that the episodes are about 20 minutes.
Perfect.
Plus, so like just the right size. Let's see, some of the interesting guests. So like I said, Sarah Miller, who works closely with Lin-Manuel Miranda and his family, has a really fascinating story to share. Michael Hausman is a friend of mine from high school. He was the first interview I did. And he's a data scientist who learned to code, built a company, is really good at helping to sort of bridge the gap between the tech world and business goals. So just trying to get, I'm trying to bring in a diversity of mindsets, people with different, technical backgrounds, lawyers. I happen to be connected with a lot of lawyers, so a lot of them happen to be former lawyers, but just trying to bring a diversity of mindset to the group, to the podcast. So I'm looking for further guests, and people who built the typical guest is someone who's built a business from a place harnessing their superpower, and looking to sort of highlight interesting work being done out in the world.
That's always so good. I love those sort of curated conversations and people I haven't met or known or heard of before, and get something that piques an interest in terms of where to take a career and stuff next. Excuse me. Now think about these conversations that are going on right now, and you and I have had, long careers, varied careers so far. Someone had asked a question, in the chat here, in terms of what are you seeing and thinking through these interviews in terms of how people are navigating the economic uncertainty and the shift, because this is a podcast focused around business. This is a very different time in business. Yes, there is. For some people, there's unprecedented, speeding up of their businesses. For others, they've had to pivot, they've had to shift. Others have gone bankrupt. So there is this whole economic turmoil, but it is so different than, post 9/11, and thinking about times we were both in New York, or the .com, bubble, or Lehman Brothers. This is different. And is there anything you're kind of gleaming from these interviews on how people are navigating that?
That's a really good question. I think that, look, my goal is to shed light on the strengths of people in business. And so, obviously you could, if you're busy, you built a business, and I've been very, like I said, present with clients going through tremendous upheaval with their businesses. I think that the idea behind the superpower idea is that it's transcendent, and you can, so if you're in a field of business that is no longer relevant, or in the pandemic has shifted, if you have that superpower, you can find a way to deploy it elsewhere, right? Or you can find a way to pivot or redirect it. And so I think that's what I want to look at is how do we adjust, when it's not always certain. And a lot of these stories are about people who tried something and failed at it, or were not, or then kind of decided that wasn't for them, and then realized, okay, this is not for me. What else am I going to do? Right. So that was where the idea of looking at people from along, who'd taken various pivots in their career was really important to me, to think about sort of that idea of using that superpower to overcome a challenge.
Yeah. So hearing you speak, I'm like, yeah, the idea that, values and your personal qualities and how you treat people will help you navigate, those situations where, your employment prospects or your business prospects seem pretty dire and outside of your control. And of course, I'm always thinking of words of my ex, who was a restructuring and turnaround guy. And he was always like, 9 times out of 10, when a company's doing bankruptcy or Chapter 11, 9 times out of 10, it's management. So that's human failure.
Yeah.
The environment.
Well,
human failure.
We definitely had clients that had vision early on. And I mean, for me, this time has really cemented my love of what I do, because I've been so privileged to be in the room when clients were discussing just fundamental changes to their business, and being part of those conversations, hearing about the planning process, just being privileged to be present with them and help them think through strategies is so rewarding. And those clients were, they were looking at the writing on the wall and knowing that this was not going to be good for their business and they needed to make a quick change, right? And I try to help them do it, with a sense of their values as a business, give the employees, if there needed to be layoffs, to try to do it in a way that was humane and, left everyone with as good a feeling as you could under the circumstances.
I'm going to say thinking of, why lawyers want to become the trusted advisor, not just the hired gun or, the ambulance chaser, because it's exactly that, those conversations with clients where you're more than just the person telling them what the letter of the law is. All right, so let's remind everyone again, the name of your new podcast is More Than A Fallback. I love this, love this, love this. Where can they find the podcast?
More Than A Fallback.com. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Twitter, I'm at Jess S. Rosen. LinkedIn, let's connect. Excited. I mean, part of the build up to the podcast has also been featuring entrepreneurs, underrepresented entrepreneurs, and those doing really important work. Using a hashtag that I got a tip from Kelly on, which is, this is what an entrepreneur looks like. So if you're an entrepreneur that wants to be highlighted, connect with me. I'm happy to put out. I've created memes for a number of entrepreneurs, and thanks to Kelly and Elena Rossini for great ideas about how to build that movement out. So lots of ways to engage with me on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is fantastic. It's and let's one more shout out to Sarah on the 4th floor, because of her, I want to say, great. And you know what? It's funny. I met Sarah because of YLEF, the Women Law Empowerment Forum. So this all once a lawyer, always a lawyer. I can't get away from the legal profession, but meeting Sarah, attending the 4th floor, that's how I've met you. It's how I've met, another fabulous lawyer, Chris Carson. And so I'm just like, wow, how lucky am I to have these wonderful women coming into my life and hearing their stories and what they're up to. So this is phenomenal. Of course, listening to you, it's like great to catch up. Thanks for coming on the water cooler. Thinking of other people, I know who'd be a great guest. So I will make those connections as well and look forward to listening to and sharing your podcast. So thanks.
Thank you.
Jessica. And we will see you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.